This bike is not your dad's short travel 29er. The Canyon Spectral 125 has slack geo, an aggressive attitude, and is built to smash trails, have fun, session your local bike parks, you name it. If you want to rip, this bike's ready. Let's dive in and see how it held up for our long-term review. Hey guys, the smart people in the analytics department tell me most of you aren't subscribed. What's the deal? Do you not like the videos? Help us out here, hit the button. So over the course of the last few years, we've been lucky enough to spend a lot of time aboard different Canyon bikes, as well as a lot of other brands out on the market. But the reason I reference Canyon's bike is that it's really cool because we've been able to see how the different bikes in their lineup perform, compare, and sort of the intended application of where each bike's strengths and weaknesses are. Now this is a 125 mil rear, 140 front 29er. Now you might be saying like, wait, isn't that the Neuron? And well, similar, yes, in terms of travel and wheel size. However, in attitude, it is very different. It is 64-degree head tube angle, right? I mean, the Neuron does not have that. A lot of short travel trail bikes don't have that. It seems like there's a new modern crop of trail bikes that are built kind of for this more purpose-built aggressive trail riding style, and I really like it, particularly in an area like this in Bend, Oregon, where we don't have a ton of super rough, chunky trails. This bike gives you the attitude, the stance, the geo that is comfortable for an enduro or downhill backgrounded rider, but you don't have all that wasted energy, all that squish, all that just extra travel that you're not gonna need on your local daily rides. So you can go out, you can pedal, you can cover big miles, but you still can ride the bike hard. You don't have to worry about steep pitches, charging into terrain that's rough or bumpy in short bits of sections. And kind of what we were calling it in the office is like, it's like a 29er slope style or slalom bike. So the CF8 is the model that we are testing here. It retails for $51.99. Canyon has a couple other carbon models available, as well as an alloy option. A difference being, besides price and material, obviously, that the carbon model does have adjustable geometry and the alloy does not. May not be a huge enough deal for those that are on a budget or looking to save some money. I don't know if it would be a huge deal for me because frankly, we haven't changed the geo on this bike since we've had it. That being said, we've taken this bike on everything from multi-day bike packing trips on the Colorado Trail to dual slalom tracks to jump zones. We even did the lower mountain at the bike park just to see how it would perform there, and a lot of other trails in between, and have been very happy with how balanced this bike is. So speaking of balanced, size large, I'm 5'11", most of our riders are in that 5'10" to 6'2" range. It has a 486 millimeter reach, which for my personal preference is a hair on the long side, but it also gives the bike a lot of stability. Then again, for being such a playful short travel bike, a little shorter reach would have made it even more playful, albeit at the possible sacrifice of some stability at speed, which this thing has in spades. Thanks in part to that 64-degree head tube angle and that long reach. 76-degree seat tube angle puts you in a pretty comfortable position for getting those miles in. There are 437 millimeter chainstays and a pretty long 1,259 millimeter wheelbase. Overall, a pretty aggressive and purpose-built geo. Speaking of purpose-built, the spec on this bike is pretty dialed overall. One area that I guess is open to a little bit of debate is the tire spec. Exo casing tires on a bike that has a 64-degree head tube angle. I think Exo Plus would have been a pretty solid call out back, if not even a double down for those that are riding in very rocky terrain. Of course, if you're regularly in rocky terrain, you might want to just go to the longer travel Spectral. Moving on to the rest of the spec, we've got Shimano XT brakes and drivetrain, which we are huge fans of. Reliable, works well, very happy all around. Fox Float X performance level suspension. No need to spend money on Kashima, it works great. There's a little less adjustability in some of the lower level components, but this gives all the basics that you need. You've got the high speed, low speed compression, you've got your rebound adjust on the shock here. I think for the most part, it does a great job of blending value and performance. Very solid all around. You've got Canyon's in-house cockpit up here, bar stem work fine, and a very comfortable ergon seat. And of course, keeping this bike rolling are a set of DT Swiss XM 1700 wheels, which have held up quite well to the aggressive cornering techniques that this bike, I wouldn't say requires, but thrives on. So, pedaling. Quite efficient actually, as you could imagine, right? Some 125 bikes pedal better than others, but I would say that Canyon has done a very good job with their triple phase 4-bar suspension setup. It is efficient. It's not gonna be the smoothest or the most supple, but it's definitely not abusive, right? It's not like an intense VPP level of stiffness. It's gonna offer some nice support. We rarely found ourselves having to flip that climb switch. So comfortable body position and rather efficient and powerful pedaling support out of that rear shock. Now, moving into the rear shock's composure on kind of more flowy, jumpy, pumpy trails. I think that a little bit of extra time and diligence spent experimenting would be a good move on this bike. We kind of varied from like 22 up to 32% sag, which can have a pretty big effect on bottom bracket height and the overall geometry of the bike, especially with such a little amount of travel. So you want to be sure that you have the right sag and pressure for your riding and your application. You know, there are some things that you're going to be battling, right? You're going to battle just the fact that it's only 125 mil of travel. So you're going to want to find the best composure, the smoothest feel you can get, but also not be wallowing super deep in the travel when you do need to compress in corners, pop off lips, or land you know, drops to flat, anything like that. It is rather progressive, so I will say that you won't probably find yourself bouncing off the bottom out spacer on this thing, but it's still important. Spend some time, play around, see what you settle on. We were pretty happy in that 28% range. Some liked 30, kind of depending really on where we were riding. So once shock pressure is dialed, this bike is super fun, very lively. The shock just kind of settles in this little sweet spot where you're pumping corners in and out of transitions, manualing stuff. Again, I would like a little shorter reach to get those manuals a little bit easier, but it does a great job compressing and going off of lips. It's very composed and nice. Now, where the bike starts to lose a tiny bit of composure in the rear end is on extended, very rough, kind of larger obstacles at speed, which, believe it or not, this 125mm bike will lure you into. So who is the Canyon Spectral 125 for? I would say that it's for aggressive-minded riders who maybe have a DH enduro type background, but are looking for a shorter travel bike. Maybe they want something for kind of more everyday pedals, getting bigger miles in, something where they're not using so much suspension travel to just pedal, cover a lot more miles, but in the odd event they find themselves tackling some really steep, chunky terrain, just absolutely ripping flow trails with big berms and jumps, and they want the geo and the attitude that will still allow them to do that with that same enduro and downhill mindset. This is gonna be that bike. Don't be afraid to get some miles in on this bike. It will do it. I would say that this is like the downhiller's cross-country bike, or like I said, if you're in an area that doesn't have super gnarly, and I mean gnarly in the terms of rough and chunky, not necessarily big jumps and high speeds, this bike is a really, really good contender. It looks like there's a lot more bikes in this category, and I'm excited to see that because it's one that I think a lot of riders will benefit from, who just frankly don't need 160 mil of travel, but want the geo and attitude to ride that way. That, in a nutshell, is the Canyon Spectral 125. If you think a 125 bike is in your future, or if you think going with a longer travel Spectral is gonna be better for your terrain, we would love to know why and what you think. Thank you guys very much for watching. One last request, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We would be very appreciative to have you join the channel. Thank you very much, and we'll see you out on the trails.